Hello, bonsoir, and welcome to the Get French Football News Show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening is Peter Rutzler. With the Winter Olympics underway in Pyeongchang, I thought it best to have a look at a few races in Ligue 1. But who's gliding to the finish line and who's taken a mighty tumble? All of that after the latest headlines. Monaco strengthened their grip on second place on Friday night as they eventually saw off Dijon 4-0. Keita Balde, Fabinho, Ronnie Lopez, and a striker's finish from Kamil Glick helped the Principality remain unbeaten in their last 11 league games. Paris Saint-Germain shook off their Bernabeu cobwebs with a 5-2 win over Strasbourg. The plucky visitors went ahead, but were then soon overwhelmed with an Edinson Cavani double sealing the victory. In the multiplex, Caen and Rennes played probably the best game of the weekend in a 2-2 draw that saw two missed penalties from the hosts and Damien de Silva's third goal in 3 games. Metz's survival hopes were given an absolutely crushing blow as a late Adamanian goal helped Troyes win 1-0 as Angers slipped back into the mire as after an agonising 1-0 loss in the final moments to Saint-Etienne. Montpellier came back from behind to draw 1-1 with Guingamp to remain in 6th, while Toulouse were yet again unable to dispatch a 10-man team that are near the bottom of the table, this time in a goalless draw against Amiens. On Sunday, Nice and Nantes flattered to deceive in a drab 1-1 draw, as Lille came from 2 goals down to earn a point at home to struggling Lyon, who at least halted their 3-game skid in the league. In the final match of the weekend, Marseille did just about enough to oversee Bordeaux with a 1-0 win at the Stade Velodrome. Florian Thauvins' 15th of the season means they stayed close to Monaco, above them, and now have a 6-point gap to Lyon behind them. And that's all for now. But for all the latest in the world of French football, head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. We start this week with the first race, and the one for the title is pretty much sewn up, but the one for the place right behind them is still in the balance. Monaco, Marseille, and Lyon are still really vying for those places, although that 4th team has fallen off. But let's talk about Monaco first, Peter. They've gone on a little bit of a run that no one's really noticed with the couple of draws that have been in there, but 11 games unbeaten, 2 4-0 wins in a row, and it was maybe a little bit of a struggle at times against Dijon. It didn't all go their way, but eventually they're seeing through it, and it seems like Jardim's finally working out how this team is built in the second half of the season.
Yeah, no, they're picking up some good form and they're putting the pressure on their 2 rivals. I think there is an element to that. I think Jardim has certainly looked to have found a formula with one that's effective and one that's working. I mean, they're picking up results, back-to-back 4-0 wins. And also, of course, beating Lyon, that was a real confidence booster. And I think since they dropped out of the French Cup, they have sort of stabilised a little bit. But as you say, they're 11 games unbeaten now in the league. And I think, of course, fundamental to all of that is that they're not playing in Europe, which is, of course, kicking in again now. And we saw, obviously, Marseille in a great position, having put 3 goals against Braga, and then Lyon as well, actually, in a strong position. But those will start to take their toll. And I think there may have been an element to that when we look at Lyon's collapse against Lille. But yeah, no, definitely. I think Monaco, they seem to have found a good formula, and obviously they were without Falcao, and the scoreline did flatter them a little bit, but another good win. Yeah, and they're certainly well clear of Lyon. They're 7 points away. Marseille still on their coattails, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, added to the fact that Monaco have no European football, at least, to think about. They have got a cup final there in March that they have their sights set on. But added to that, they've already played Lyon. They've already played Marseille. They have got, obviously, PSG to come. But that game doesn't really matter as much as it did beforehand, at least. Marseille still obviously have PSG in Le Classique this upcoming weekend as well. But you look at their next few games, Toulouse, Bordeaux at home, Strasbourg, Lille at home. That's another 4 games. You could feasibly see them going 15 unbeaten there, and then you go past the cup final, and it's Rennes, it's Nantes, and then you maybe hit PSG. Because they could go on a run of possibly 17 games unbeaten, and then run into a Paris Saint-Germain game. Maybe they get a little bit of a chance there in the sense of it's a great occasion for them. They know how important that game will be to finishing second, given that they're running after that is absolutely pretty much either mid-table fodder or relegation strugglers who might even already be down in Amiens and Troyes on the final day of the season. They might already be stuck somewhere. So you look at that run-in for them now with the results they've got, that big win against Lyon as well. They have to be kind of favourites, especially now Jardim's adapting those players that Peter struggled really to adapt at the start of the season. You know, we've discussed before that Monaco seem to come in waves in the last sort of 4 or 5 years. They sell players, they bring players in. Sometimes it takes them a while to bed in, but now in that 4-3-3, Keita Balde scored again. Yuri Tielemans had another good game. They're starting to find their rhythm and their place in this Monaco side.
Yeah, I think when we look back to early in the season, as you're saying, about how Monaco were, you know, they're in that transition, they're in that coming back round again phase where they're sort of reshaping themselves, remolding themselves, finding what pieces they need for how they want to be and what the puzzle's going to look like. And for them to be in the commanding position in second place, you know, is definitely an achievement. And then Jardim should take a lot of credit for that. Came under a little bit of scrutiny, I think, earlier in the season. Of course, the performances in the Champions League were woeful, quite frankly. And you know, there were some serious questions raised defensively. I think that's still an area that they'll want to work on. I think they're certainly will want to have more depth to centre half, midfield. I still don't think it's fully solved. I think it's a different proposition when you're playing Ligue 1, lesser sides than your rivals as such, and we've seen that with PSG, especially obviously last week against Real Madrid with Lo Celso. I mean, it looks good in Ligue 1, but when you're playing teams that really do test you, then you may get found out if not everything's right. But that all said, and as you pointed out, I think their running's good, isn't it? I mean, it's as you say, they seem to have got that cluster of games. I think, you know, they've got obviously Toulouse, Bordeaux will be tricky, Strasbourg aren't easier at Le Mans, and then Lille and PSG. I think this sort of next phase, so moving into March could be a little bit of a trickier month. But then the run-in is a stroll, I feel, especially the clubs that could already be relegated, but also Guingamp and Caen look set for another middle of the way season. So I definitely agree, but I think there are some areas to work on. I don't know what areas you think that they could be building on. I think up front is an area that he's still playing around with things. I think Balde's come on, certainly, but with Falcao's injury. But I mean, there's options there. There's Jovetic, Balde, the new young kids come in as well, the £60 million kids. So there's definitely some options in there, and still finding that right formula I still think is elusive. But if you're second and comfortable, I mean, it's fair play to them.
Yeah, exactly. I think you make a good point that there's still issues with this team in terms of depth, in terms of actually challenging Paris Saint-Germain or being a more competitive side, at least anyway, in the Champions League is still there to be shot. I do want to highlight someone who has played, and you didn't mention his name really, but Pietro Pellegrini.
There we go.
Yeah, has been. He's played the last couple of He's played the last couple of games really. Ever so often he's sort of come on for the last couple of minutes. He played the game against he came on against Angers, I believe, if I remember rightly. No, he didn't. It might have been the cup game he came on in. But he did start. Well, he did come on against Dijon and won a free kick that led to Camo Glick's goal, and he almost had a chance himself if Ghazal had decided to switch it to him. But it was really interesting to see him play. I like the look of him immediately. He's a big lad for his age. He's tall. He's not weak in any kind of way. He already has that upper body strength, which can be the kind of knock on a lot of young players. They can be quite slender and not physically built yet, but he's instantly filling his frame. He was strong against a couple of centre-backs against Dijon when he needed to be. He's got nice little feet and movement. He's got a little bit of speed to him as well. He's a little bit of everything. I really like him. I think I've seen a little bit of him when he was still at Genoa. Didn't play too much really, but I remember listening to James Horncastle, who's a great expert on Serie A, that Genoa were just a little bit cautious in playing him. Really, they didn't want to risk it. It was bemusing to a lot of people in Italian audiences that he wasn't playing because he seems such like a talent, and they all believe that he could be the next sort of. They compare him very much to Christian Vieri, but I think he looks like he's a real talent. I mean, he held that ball up well. He linked play nicely. He didn't look uncomfortable out there in any shape or form. Although it's not, I suppose it's not the most intimidating atmosphere to go out into in Monaco. But he certainly wore that shirt without it being too heavy. And I'm really interested, especially in the second half of the season, with the games they've got against Toulouse, against these weak sides in the last couple of games as well. Especially if they have second tied up, it'd be really interesting to see how he continues. And I also, for Monaco's sake as well, I'm a little bit worried about Leonardo Jardim possibly leaving this summer as well. You think of the vacancies that possibly might open up at places like Chelsea, maybe at Arsenal, even Paris Saint-Germain, Real Madrid. I don't think you're out of the realms of thinking that a coach of this kind of quality that's shown again and again that it may take a little bit of time to adapt where he needs to be with his team, especially when they're fresh, and he's lost a lot of players, but again and again he's making this Monaco team tick again. I mean, they struggled when he started there, but he got them playing the way they needed to when they needed to be defensively solid. Then he created that crazy team last season that were wonderful to watch with so many talent. They lost so much of it this season. And yet again, he's starting to slowly make this team better again and become a force in Ligue 1. And if they would have done this earlier, maybe even in Europe as well. But they still have a lot to work on. And there's one team that's chasing them pretty hard. And they might be kicking themselves, really, that they dropped to 2 points last weekend, really, in Marseille, Peter. They got a good win this weekend against Bordeaux. It was a little bit frustrating, really, that game on Sunday, because we mentioned on the preview show that we felt that could be a cracker given how both teams were the real informed sides, bar Paris Saint-Germain in Ligue 1. But it was a bit of a damp squib in the end. It ended up being Marseille dominant, scoring the goal, and then the second half really being nothing much of the sorts, wasn't it?
I think we've run out of luck with the Sunday night games because we've had so many good ones. It was just, you look at the team, think, oh, Marseille, Bordeaux in great form. Must be a great game. Yeah, it wasn't really. I didn't pick my games well at all yesterday, actually. I ended up watching Nice v Nantes as well, and that was dreadful. I'm sure I just completely zoned out during that one. Anyway, Marseille certainly are in great form, and I think we were praising Jardim just there, but Rudy Garcia definitely deserves a lot of credit for what he's doing with OM. I think we've gone over this before and about just, how much the Champions project was ridiculed at the start of the season. They were so disjointed. For me, whenever I watch Marseille, it was this sort of weird collection of players that just didn't fit. Louis van Gaal sort of Man United team, where you just got these sort of players there that you just don't really know how they blend together. But I think they've been, whether they've blended or whether they've been masked, it's all down to Florian Thauvin. He's been fantastic for them, and he's even scoring headers from corners now. So his ability knows no ends, it seems. So I think in terms of how they managed the game, I thought that was really impressive for me. I think they didn't give Bordeaux a sniff. I don't think Bordeaux were very adventurous. They were quite negative, which is a shame, because in the games they have played under Poyet, they've been very they've had a high intensity. They've gone after teams and they've got their wins, but we didn't really see that. But I think credit is due to Marseille, because they did manage the game well. Luis Gustavo, very much the dominant figure in the centre of the park. Suhalu Mete for Bordeaux looked a bit off the pace. He looked out of the game. He was conceding silly fouls, and I think that just kind of symbolised the difference between the two sides. But I think with Marseille, it's a question of how far they can keep this going. I mean, the result against Braga was a huge result. And it'd be nice to see. I think it's set up nicely again. I don't want to jinx it, but for Le Classique on Sunday, it could well be another big game, because PSG, lots of questions to be asked, especially in central midfield as well. Will they show up for a big game, which they've yet really to do this season? But they will certainly face a challenge in Marseille. And I think Marseille will be keen to make a statement going into that.
Yeah, we're getting lucky soon, aren't we? We're getting a Le Classique this weekend, and then in midweek we get a cup version of a Le Classique as well, so an extra one this season as well. And yeah, it feels like it's a massive game really for Marseille. If they want to get second, I feel like they have to beat Paris Saint-Germain because Monaco on a roll. We saw it last season, really. We saw it the season before, really, as well, and even before then as well. That Monaco in second half of the seasons do seem to really turn on the afterburners. Really, they are a creature of habit. If they start winning games, they tend to get on a bit of a roll. It might be stopped by Paris Saint-Germain, but by that time, which is 5-6 games time, they might be far untouchable really for Marseille unless they went on a really barren run in the last sort of couple of months in the season. It's a massive game, really, and interestingly, I think it we won and lost in the midfield, and that's really where I think Marseille's been excellent in the last few games as well. I know Thauvin will take a lot of the headlines. He's been sensational. It's frightening. He's starting to score headers as well now. It was a really good header as well at that. But I think they found the right mix. Really, they had Maxime Lopez in a lot at the start of the season, and he struggled quite a bit. But Gustavo is sort of the one controlling things, playing out from the back, being able to sweep up in front of the defence. I think he's added to those. He's given more confidence to Rolando and Rami, who've formed a really nice partnership, even though they do potentially lack pace maybe, but also cover for the likes of Amavi and Sakai, especially to get forward when they need to, because they, especially the Japanese international, he's very adventurous. But I think adding Zambo and Guisa in there as that sort of box-to-box player, getting himself around the pitch, being busy, keep it moving around when they're joining attacks, moving around when sliding alongside Gustavo when they needed to. I think he's added a nice balance to it. And more importantly, I think Morgan Sanson's been excellent this season. And I think he continued that last night. He was probably my favourite player. He was a little bit of everywhere. He was dangerous. He was picking up fouls from the Bordeaux players that just wanted to kick him. He had a couple of half-decent chances as well himself where he burst into the box and maybe just ran out of bits. But it just feels like Sanson is maybe an inch or so from being a really, really, really good player in terms of even pushing for a spot in the French squad, because he's really added an extra dimension to this Marseille team that maybe the other midfielders like Lopez haven't quite been able to do. But you do still worry really in the long run. I mean, there's the European campaign still, Peter, and that result in Prague will be massive because it gives them a chance to maybe rest a few of them. But depth, full stop, is where they worry. You think if there's maybe an injury to Germain, especially if there's an injury to Thauvin, could this be a deck of cards really that falls over if someone really important to them that they can't replace falls out of the frame for the next sort of run-in?
Well, it'll get really serious if they have to start playing Mitroglou. Then they really are in a difficulty. But no, I think you're right. I think there are certainly some areas where you question the depth of the side. I think you're bang on about midfield. I think that balance that Samba and Guisa and Luis Gustavo have given Marseille and Morgan Sanson, just that little bit of freedom has really, really given them a boost. And I think you lose one of them and you lose that balance. If it does feel like it's very nicely poised, especially with the front three as well. I mean, Valer-Germain is not your out-and-out forward. He's a link player. He's not the type to run off a shoulder. And it allows Thauvin to really dominate games. And it should really allow Payet to dominate games too. I think we mustn't write him off too much. I think he definitely hasn't had the best season, but I feel like he is growing. He seems to be, every now and again, I think there's a couple of great passes he put in. Not his best performance. We're still yet to see that, but I think the system suits them, and especially with Amavi behind him bombing on, it really does give them some options. But I do agree on the point of depth. You do look at what they've got in behind that, and Maxime Lopez has been in and out. Defensively, I mean, Abdenour, Sarr's done okay at right back. He's been quite impressive when he's come in. But it's just beyond that level, and then you're thinking, well, what have they got? And that's the real challenge for Rudy Garcia, I think, if, say, the games do pile up and they do start to fall on top of each other. But I think for now, it's all about maintaining the form. I think they've got a tough run of games on the horizon, and they've got to try and keep pace with Monaco, I feel, because we know how good Lyon can be. And we'll talk about them next. And I think, if they don't maintain their current run of form, then they could drop out of it. And I still think, as we said before in previous podcasts, it's one of those with the top three, they seem to go in peaks and troughs. One of them has a good week, one of them will have a bad week. This week again, it's Lyon, and we've got Monaco and Marseille in the ascendancy. So I wouldn't be surprised at some point it switches around again.
Yeah, and a massive week, as you mentioned, really for Lyon. It's a really excellent Sunday. If you're off work or if you're at home and you're not deciding what to do, watch. And if you don't really want to tune into the League Cup final, depending on your allegiances, of course, there's an excellent Sunday really, because not only do we get Le Classique, we get the Rhone Derby as well as Lyon host Saint-Etienne, which is really a treat for us French football fans. But that's a massive game really for Lyon now. They're winless in 4. They lost 3 in a row before that draw against Lille. They were 2-0 up. They let it slip to go to 2-2, and they're facing a Saint-Etienne side that are maybe a little bit more buoyed than they have been the last couple of weeks. They were really lucky against Angers, really. They were awful, and Angers were really dominating them, but Ludovic Boutel gifted Robert Berich on his birthday an open net, essentially, to put the ball into, which is a shame for them, and we'll possibly talk about them later. But a massive week for Lyon, really. They go obviously to Villarreal with a good lead, expected to probably still push on. If they grab a goal, really, that tie should really be over with. But then the focus goes to that Rhone Derby, a massive game for them because they're already 6 points behind now, Peter, and they've got Marseille in a few weeks as well, which they'll certainly have circled on their diaries, providing they don't drop any more points between them. But they've been a shambles the last couple of weeks. The 2 goals again against Lille, I mean, Mike Maignan gifts it to Bertrand Traoré for the first one. The second one is a little bit of a defensive lapse as well. The 2 goals that Lille score are pretty poor as well, especially the second one, really. I don't think Anthony Lopez covers himself in any kind of glory, but they just can't seem to hold on to anything anymore. It feels much like the Lyon we saw in the first 5-6 weeks of the season, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And then I think there was a stat doing the round that it's 4 times this season that they've thrown away a 2-goal lead, which is really quite concerning. And you don't want these kind of things to become a habit. We've in the past we've looked at Lyon and Bruno Genesio and wondered, well, does he have the backup plan, the plan B? This week wasn't really about the plan B. It was more a case of losing your heads. And we've talked about the Lyon being a young side. You look at the squad. I mean, Fekir is a young captain anyway. He was rested. Mariano, relatively young players in Ndombele, Toussaint, and you wonder whether they have that inner steel, that leadership. And at the moment, it's not coming across. And of course, whether Genesio has got it in his locker really to find this inner steeliness and try and drill it home, because these kind of results, they can spiral and it gets in your head. And I feel like with Lyon, we know how good they are, and I think one of the labels that's been chucked at them is this element of individualism a little bit. I think that's sort of personified by how Mariano plays. The sentiment that, once we get 1 or 2 goals ahead, it's all about how can I improve my own statistics and how can I, embellish my own position. And I think the game against Lille, it started very, very well. I mean, it was promising to see Bertrand Traoré get on the score sheet. He's been in and out of the side. He somehow found himself behind Maxwell Cornet. But to get 2 goals, that was a huge boost for him. It looked to be going well. I mean, they generally were dominant in the game. But again, they found themselves undone. And we wonder, okay, partly, you have to wonder, are they defensively solid enough? Toussaint has dropped off a little bit. I don't know what you would add to that. But I think Morel and Marcelo have dropped in terms of their standards. That said, I think Araujo was excellent. I think his second goal was superb, and he was instrumental in the first. But it's very concerning. I mean, immediately they've got Villarreal this week, and they've got a 2-goal lead. So I don't know what that means for that.
Yeah, I think personally that given also the players they rested as well, I think they looked past this one really. I thought they saw this one as Lille still being the side that you could sort of walk over, and that's not the case anymore really. I bet they must have been really up for it. Galtier will be desperate to get a result against a Lyon side being associated with Saint-Etienne for so long, and it looked poor to me. Even when Fekir and Aouar came on, really, for the last sort of 10 minutes, they both got bookings. I don't know where that came from, really. At least they gave a bit of fight because not many other players did in that second half. And yeah, I don't get Genesio sometimes. I mean, I don't understand why he doesn't start Diakabe regularly and with Marcelo. Again, this one, they started Diakabe and Morel. I think Morel had a good half of the season. He's not a centre-back, though, and I think he'll be the first to admit it, really. He wasn't great in this game. He's given away a penalty earlier in the last game as well. He's not the greatest defensive. Well, he's a decent defensive mind, but he's not very tall. He's not very quick. I don't know why you try and risk playing him there on a regular basis. And I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. They were winning 2-1. There's 20 minutes left on the clock. Let's think of our first substitution, really, with Lille maybe getting a bit of a rise from that. So he brings off Raphael for Ferland Mendy, and you shrug your shoulders. You go, well, let's bring off the right back for a left back, stick him right back, and also not add any defensive solidity at all. Mendy's very much in the similar vein of Raphael, of being an attacking player. He might be ever so slightly more defensive, but it's not a massive one. If you were trying to hold on for the result, you'd bring Marcelo on and you'd stick Jeremy Morel at right back or something like that, someone more experienced. It was very, very strange. It didn't make much sense at all. And that is Genesio in a nutshell, really. I think he's looked out a lot on this. And really, you do worry about his job. If they finish fourth, with this talent that they have, with the chances they've had this season, with the players they've got, they should not be finishing fourth. I think they should probably, with the team they have, especially even in the background with players that they can bring in, I think they should be above Marseille, really. I think it's a shambles that they fell. 3 games in a row is bad. And then to throw away another lead, like you say, a fourth 2+ goal lead that they've thrown away this season is atrocious. That's not good enough at all. And a lot of people will be questioning Genesio again, and as a lot of Lyon fans are again, and right ahead of a big game as well. But let's sort of round off this conversation before we move on, really, to who you think will finish second then. Peter, on Monaco, obviously the front runners, Marseille are still in there, Lyon hanging on by a thread. Who do you have?
It's got to be Monaco. I think it's just based purely on fixtures. I feel like Marseille, they have been excellent. I mean, they really do have that almost a well-oiled machine now. But as we were talking about, take one of those cogs out of the machine, and you take an important one out like Tovan or Gustavo, and suddenly it can derail quite quickly. I think their fixtures are a little bit tougher. So for me, Monaco, then Marseille, then Lyon, which is, as you say, it's quite extraordinary, because if we just think back a couple of weeks ago, when Lyon were playing such superb football, especially the victory over PSG, and then Monaco in the cup shortly afterwards. So yeah, I agree. It's a very, very bizarre turn of events. But yeah, Monaco, Marseille, Lyon.
Yeah, maybe Lyon slowly, after this game at least anyway, in the weekend, they'll slowly turn their attentions to the Europa League should they continue to get through against Villarreal. Let's have a talk about another race now, and we'll be a little bit quicker on this one because a lot of the teams played pretty awful games, really, other than maybe one at the weekend. There's probably, you would say, maybe 5 teams in the running for that 5th place, which is the last Europa League place. There's about 4 points that are separating Nantes, who currently occupy there, Montpellier, Rennes, Bordeaux, who've come out of nowhere, really, and Nice. And I'll start very quickly with that game that I watched as well, unfortunately, Peter, between Nantes and Nice. 1-1 draw. Dante scored relatively early on, and Emiliano Sala from the spot helped them get back into a 1-1. But especially the second half, I couldn't tell you what happened in that second half. I don't think I've seen a worse half of football in the game, and that maybe personifies the mid-table to those below the top 4 to mid-table all season long, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. I mean, I'm glad you said that, because I was going to say I can't remember the second half.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure I watched it. It was definitely on. But yeah, no, it was a really dire game. I've got written on my notes for this, which is how are they still in 5th? Their form has been poor has Nantes, and they haven't been picked off because the sides below them just keep stuttering. No one seems to be able to put together a decent run of form. I mean, you've got Bordeaux have entered the mix now, but they've come from essentially the relegation scrap, and they've planted themselves within relatively close to striking distance. But yeah, and a really, really dire game. And I think Nice have excuses. I think they've got some players plainly out of form for one. You've got Seri still yet to find his best. Cyprian's coming back from injury. Malang Sarr hasn't been great, and players struggling a little bit. But I think also then they've also got their injuries. Le Marchand, Jallet, Suke at the backs, and they've played a part. And I think the penalty showed how that's affecting them. And Berne giving it away, a silly foul, lunging in on Salah. So for them, from their perspective, I can see why they've hit a little bit of a quagmire. But for Nantes, it's not been a great 2018. Actually, I think they've only won just the once, if I'm not mistaken, in the league. They seem to have hit a bit of a rut. Ranieri's tinkering has come unstuck a little bit, but they'll take heart from the fact that Salah is still scoring. I mean, it was from the spot, but that's 4-4 for him. I mean, they're not getting turned over by sides. You wouldn't turn around and go they're in trouble. I mean, they picked up a good win against Guingamp recently. But there are some signs that you think, where are they going? And I think we worry about that with Ranieri's sides generally in terms of how they set up. They're very, very negative. And they felt like with this game in particular, it wasn't as though Nice were going for them and grabbing them by the throat. They had spells in the game, but even when they were dominant and pressing the home side, there was a distinct lack of creativity, which was concerning. Rongier wasn't getting on the ball and influencing things as much as he would like. Thomason cut a frustrated figure. It's for now it's fine, but I think Ranieri will be hoping to turn things around. The downside is they've got Marseille on the horizon. I think Amiens first, which is a winnable game, which would be a good confidence booster before they travel to the Velodrome. But yeah, we may as well move on from this game because it was just dire, wasn't it? And I think just quickly from a Nice perspective, Balotelli, I do feel sorry for him. I mean, his form has been really, really good, but it just seems like everyone around him isn't keeping up to his level, really, and it hasn't really stuck out as much as it has of late. I think the Europa League game really is a prime example. He scores the 2 goals and then they still throw it away. And then this weekend, he cut a really frustrated figure. He was constantly sniping at the referee, sarcastic, smiling and laughing. Wasn't getting on the ball, and I think that's symptomatic of Nice's struggles this season. And I wouldn't be surprised if he does move away because there has been the links back to Italy, and I think his form's been good enough to merit a move to a Champions League club, and he may not get that with Nice. So I think that's one of the main things I took from the game is that we're seeing a Ballo now who's looking elsewhere. I feel because he hasn't really been that frustrated at times this season, not in the way that he was, I think, at the weekend.
No, I give Balotelli credit. I think that's been lost in the sort of dullness, really, of the Nice season. It's been a bit of a weird one. They were terrible to start off with, and then they got a lot better for a month, and then all of a sudden they sort of hover between good and bad. We've not really talked about them much really this season, it feels like. And Balotelli's been by far their best player, I think. Fair play to him. He's not sulked. He's not moaned about it. There's been a couple of little bits of frustration. There was that incident, obviously, last week, which thankfully is rightfully being condemned and looks like it's going to head to maybe a nasty end for the referee, at least anyway. But he's been great. That team's been not great. And I think that there's two sides of that, and that's the support that really he's had. And I think there's two areas particularly that Nice have struggled this season. Is one, and you've mentioned it briefly, and that's the fullbacks. Having Suke out hasn't helped, but when they lost Pereira, obviously because he really deserves to be playing Champions League football, and Dalbert, who went to Inter, they've just not replaced them really. Suke is a good right back, and I really like him, but they desperately miss him. Berne and Coley were not very good. They're not great defensively. They're not particularly adventurous going forward either in creating. So they don't really add anything to this Nice team that's just missing something. And one of those things it's missing, and I think not enough people have pointed this out, is Yunus Belhanda as well. Having players in and around Balotelli just make him that little bit better. I mean, player's not too bad at it, but he's obviously playing as sort of an inside forward from the left. Alan Saint-Maximin has been pretty good with him as well in creating runs and trying to make space for him. But having someone just next to him or behind him, it's been really missing. And not having maybe someone like Cyprian fill that role, who obviously he came on at the weekend, he didn't start. I think it might have been just to give him a little bit of a rest, to be fair, because he's only just come back from that major injury, but they really struggled. Seri's not been as good. The midfield isn't as great as it was, and you just feel like they won't finish fifth. They needed a result against a Nantes side that are just tepid, really. I mean, they don't really do much. I mean, Salah's their top scorer, and he's mainly sticking away penalties, really. He's not vivacious. He's a little bit like Bambi on ice sometimes, but he's getting the occasional couple of goals for them. They have fallen off a cliff, really, this second half of the season. You were right. That 3-0 win against Guingamp a few weeks ago is their only win of 2018 so far. They just don't have the adventure. They still don't. They've played Rongier further forward, which has helped, but they need better players around him. I don't think either of the wingers and Thomason and any of the other ones catch a Lichklitch when they bring him on. I don't think he's good enough. Iloki is in and out of games. Yeah, they need more players, really. They, especially in the summer, they need to try and figure out what they want to do with this team, especially with Dubois going. They're obviously having defensive issues at the moment as well, with Gigi having to play centre-back, which is not his preferred position, really, but he might be someone who replaces Dubois at full-back. I do like the likes of Liam, but you start thinking that him, Rongier, maybe they start looking for the door in the summer, and then you should really start to worry about a Nantes team that will slide back down the table. Let's briefly touch on these other three teams, really, that are fighting for fifth, because Europa League is a big thing for a lot of these teams, really, other than maybe Bordeaux, who seem to try and skip on it every year when they are in it. So let's talk about Montpellier, who've had an excellent season, really. They got a decent one-all draw against Guingamp. They maybe could have nicked it as well, and if in fairness, so could have the away side, and a silly penalty from Hilton, which seems strange to say given the season he's had. But they are the second best defence in Ligue 1 behind Paris Saint-Germain. Are they someone, if they maybe get it right at the other end, because they have got a +3 goal difference, which is better than any of the other teams around them. If they can get a couple more goals, a couple more wins, could they be in the mix?
Oh, they're definitely in the mix. I think the way Zakarian set them up this season has been extremely effective. They've been picking up results against big clubs. I mean, they're not really a side that goes for goals, that's for sure. But, you know, they've got a really solid defence. The switch to a back four was interesting. I think it worked okay. I think Guingamp have been a bit mediocre in terms of how they approach games, and I don't think this fixture would suit them anyway if they wanted to play on the counter-attack. But even so, they still haven't really shown any of the exciting flair that we saw last season. I think they've got that nice balance. The fullbacks get on really well. Aguilar, with his shot, was turned in by CO of all people. So I think they're certainly in the mix because they're just picking up points, and I think they're in a decent run of form at the moment. I think it's 3 wins in 4 before this game, and then this is another good point. They're only a point behind Nantes, and you can't really argue with that. And they've got some decent fixtures coming up. I mean, Strasbourg isn't easy away from home, but Strasbourg defensively leak, and if then Montpellier shut the door, they should pick up some points there. And Lyon are all over the place before they face them. So I think with Montpellier, it'd be a case of more of the same. I think Zakarian came out after the game and was disappointed with the first half. I think he called it 8 against 11 were his words. So I think they've got a number of young players in there, in Benza, Sambia, Ikone, who could probably offer something at the other end of the field, but we haven't really seen that. And I don't think they lend themselves to that. But, you know, they've got a really strong work ethic. They're very well organised. And I think that's all you need in Ligue 1, essentially. I think that's why I think it's a bit of a damning indictment that you've got Nantes and Montpellier in the position that they are in when they play such dire football half the time. So that's doing a disservice, I think, a little bit to Montpellier. Oh, actually, it's not really. It depends. Negative football. That's less offensive, isn't it? Is that how you'd say? Well, I'm going to say, yeah, defensive is the answer, but it's still, you know, it's not your free-flowing goals at either end Sunday night fixture.
No, I'll take defensive. I think that's the right thing to say, really. I do want to quickly mention on Montpellier, and it should come out over sometime this week. I've written a piece on Nordi Mukiele that will come out. I think he's a terrific young player. Moved to the centre-back. I don't think he's as good as in a 4 because he can be a little bit risky. He does like to sort of jump in a little bit in terms of intercepting, but he's got great pace. He's got great physical about him. He's obviously started at right back and has moved more centrally, but I think he's capable of playing both. He might even be capable of playing defensive midfielder as well because he's got a wonderful positivity about him. He looks like an excellent defender. He's learning every day. He's admitted that he does want to try and stay at Montpellier at least for another season to hone his skills. And next to someone like Hilton, it's not harming in him anyway. And he's a real bright spot in someone who could really go on to do major things. And if Montpellier can hopefully hold on for him for another season, they could get a really, really good fee for him, which would be massive for the club. But moving on to a team that had a really interesting game this weekend in Rennes. The 2-2 drawing against Caen was terrific, really, and 2 missed penalties. And I know Rich will want to mention some facts in this. And it's not only a game of goals and missed penalties, but there was the first time. Well, Enzo Crivelli scored. He's the 4th goal scorer for Caen this season, which seems incredible, behind Damien De Silva, who scored 3-3 now, the centre back, which is also a little bit crazy. Ronnie Rodelin and Ivan Santini being the other 2 goal scorers. It was also the first time Diafra Sakho scored a goal in Ligue, which seems strange to many, given that he was obviously top scorer in Ligue 2 before he joined a West Ham. And also, the other one coming from this was the first time a Swiss referee has managed a game in Ligue, and with that new sort of buddy system, almost you would say, with the Swiss FA, with someone coming over. But it was a terrific game and kind of indicative of Rennes' season. They kind of play to everyone's level depending on who they're playing, and they played a mid-table side. They played relatively well. So did the other side. It ended up as a 2-2 draw. It's, again, I think Rami Bensebaini personified it perfectly, set up the goal for Diafra Sakho, gave away both penalties. It is one of those seasons really for Rennes. And if they did, I mean, they're only 4 points off Nantes at the moment. They've got a few interesting games coming up. They've had some really good results, including that win against Lyon last week. I think they're a side that might just about sneak in that fight. If they can sort of put a run together with those sides being a little bit more negative, maybe having a difficult couple of games where maybe if they can't score, then they might be struggling. Rennes have definitely got goals in them now, with Sarr and with Sakho, and they've got good midfielders like Bourigeaud who contribute as well. They could be a really interesting one in this mix, and could be a real dark horse in this one. And someone, Peter, that should be definitely a dark horse, and we'll talk about them very briefly. It's Bordeaux. They won 3 in a row heading into that game on Sunday. It was a little bit disappointing, really, that they didn't put much more of a fight against Marseille, but that was the biggest test for Gus Poyet, and they didn't really pass it. Do you think that they can still be in that fight, or do you think that maybe they've got too much ground to make up to really push for 5th?
No, I think they're definitely in the fight. I think when we consider the run of form of the sides around them, that the fact that they've so easily pulled themselves back into it, they should be there. And with the players they've got, they should give it a really good go. Just quickly on Rennes, I just wanted to add Jeremy Gelin. What I've seen of him, I'm really, really impressed. It's not just his defensive and the balance with Nagnon. It's his long balls, his ability to ping the ball left and right. I think is such an asset. I think it was for the 2nd goal for Rennes. He's pinged it straight to Ismail Assar, which has set up Sakho for his 2nd. I think he's a really nice counterpoint, and they do, as you say, they've got those young players in there, and you'd want them to progress. But back off my tangent, Bordeaux. I think with Poyet, I think against Marseille they approached it in the wrong manner. I think they were too negative. Depreva didn't get in the game as much as you'd like. I do think he suits that left-hand side. Laborde in the centre. I think he gives them more of a focal point, and I think we've seen some of that. I think they lacked intensity. I think Marseille played it well. They played deep and then were able to cut through them relatively easily. But I don't think Poyet's changed that much. I think he's stayed loyal to the defenders that have come in. I mean, after the chaos that went before with Toulalan and Levchuk, it was a sink with multiple holes. But Koundé's come in, this youngster. He's only 19 and he's played 8 in a row now, and he looks really, really solid. Pablo's come back from his loan in Brazil, and they form a nice little duo at the back. And they've got a good team, especially with Costil behind them, organising things. Obviously, there's Malcolm, but we hadn't seen him back to his shining best, and we're still waiting for that consistency. I think that's been a criticism of him all season. I mean, he exploded at the start of the year, and then it was only in peaks and troughs, and I think we're still in that, and that's one of Poyet's biggest challenges. But I think when we were looking at Bordeaux and they're in good run of form, under Gorvanek at the start of the season, we were lauding the attacking options they've got. Kamano came off the bench. They've got Jonathan Cafu as well, and so I think if Poyet can get the right balance out of those players, then they've certainly got a good chance of making a good challenge, and also getting the best out of players who didn't really do as well as you would expect. People like Lucas Larager, who they brought in. Suahu Meite's come in and has looked good. I don't think he was good against Marseille at the weekend, but I think he does offer them something. I think he offers them something a bit more a combative presence in the centre of the park. So I think they've got that. I think they've got a nice balance now, and it'd be. I mean, they started well. They had that managerial bounce, and I think this defeat means the honeymoon is over. So now we can really dissect and see what Poyet's trying to do, because he hasn't really changed too much. It's been more of a player-induced bounce, but they're definitely in the running, especially with this squad they've got.
Yeah, this is absolutely the moment for him to really show his chops, really. And on this one, I won't give who we predicted in going fifth, because it is a little bit, I think on this one, a little bit too close to predict at the moment. But we'll leave that one open-ended at least for the rest of the season. Let's move on really to I think at least anyway, the most important one really, which is that trapdoor back into Ligue 2. And there's a few sides that are still fighting away down there, but one that probably this was the end of really this week. We mentioned on the preview show, it was really do or die for Metz against Troyes. And agonisingly, they had a few chances of their own, but Troyes were probably the better side. They maybe would have been okay with a draw. It's still not the greatest result. They really needed a win, but to lose it, to then be, well, they're now 7 points behind Angers. That's just get up to second from bottom. It's 8 up to Amiens. It's 9 for safety now, complete safety at least anyway. That felt like the final dagger in the heart of Metz, didn't it?
Yeah, I think when you look at the sides they've still got to play, they've got PSG, Nantes, Rennes as well in there, Bordeaux. So I think there are a number of sides there that can take the points off them. And I mean, they're 8 points adrift now of the playoff position. So it really was a bit of do or die. And it's a shame really, because they did found that excellent run of form. They brought themselves within touching distance, and then they slipped up, and it's a shame. But I think Troyes deserved to win it. They were certainly the better side in that game. There was a deserved winner from Nyan. And I think it goes to show that when you do sell or not replace your best assets, which it was the point we made at the very, very start of the season and has continued throughout. You know, losing Sarr and losing Diabate, who's doing really well in Italy, I think, has cost them. They haven't been able to replace them. I mean, Nolan Roux had that spike in form when they were doing well, but it hasn't lasted, and it's not something that I think was ever sustainable. But you never know. There's still a chance. I think the sides above them are creeping at a very slow pace. I think roughly one of them will win every couple of weeks. So it's. I mean, we are expecting a miracle here for Metz to even try. So it's a shame that they couldn't sustain it and try and pull themselves back into the running, because then we'd have a really exciting relegation battle. But as it stands, we've only got that one certainty place, that one direct relegation spot now really to fight for. But for Troyes, it's huge. And I think obviously they play Dijon tomorrow. They'll want to build on that. I think they deserve to win that game, as I was saying. And if they win again, then that's 30 points. And, 30 points is a really good tally to be on. 4 points clear of the drop, with some good fixtures to come. And I think they bounced back after that Strasbourg defeat, because I think that was, that was a real hammer blow. And if they'd lost to Metz, then we'd be talking about Troyes' funeral as well. So yeah, no, it's a big result for Troyes, and I think it's curtains for Metz.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the win for Metz would have been them on 21 points, and then Troyes still on 24. So you would have felt that they maybe pulled everyone a little bit close to them, even though the other teams obviously got results at the weekend, but not many of them really got the important win that would have pulled them away. It really would have pulled that pack closer to Metz. But now it just seems further and further away. It's such a shame, unless they need to get on it right now, unfortunately. And it just doesn't feel like it at the moment. That felt like too much of an important game that it might just knock the stuffing out of them. But you're absolutely right as well in the reverse that's a massive result for Troyes at the moment. Any win at the bottom of the table at the moment is a massive result. I mean, they're still only maybe 2 points above the relegation spot and one off the playoff, really, but it's a massive win at the moment, given that other teams below the two, and two we'll come on to very briefly in a moment, that look like they're starting to gather a bit of momentum, really, in terms of slowly getting back to the form that we would expect from the caliber of teams there. But one side that was as a factor of that and a really disheartening loss, it felt like, at least anyway, for Angers, who dropped back into the bottom two on 25 points. What a really awful game to lose. They were absolutely all over Saint-Etienne at points. They had great chances. Kaltoko Kambe had a few. They looked like that at some point they were maybe just going to break it. And then Peter, I don't know what Ludovic Patel was doing, but he must be in tatters, really, because he's just gifted the ball to Robert Beric, the only chance really Saint-Etienne have all game, and it goes in, and it just feels like Angers every single time this season. And we mentioned it earlier that they just kept drawing games, but now they keep letting games get through their fingers in even worse ways in losing games, and that's a bad trend to be having at this time of the season.
Yeah, I think it sums up their season pretty much. What happened against Saint-Etienne. I think we've sort of been in denial a little bit that they were doing badly because of the amount of draws they were getting. And I mean, they have lost, I think it's the same number of games as Saint-Etienne, but obviously the draws in the start of the season have cost them. They weren't great at home either. This is another defeat. So yeah, it really did sum up their season in that, they've looked okay. I mean, they looked better than some of the sides around them and generally had a strong side, especially with Kaltoko Kambe up top. And it's another game that slipped away and another result that pulls them further adrift. And you do worry now. We've been worrying for some time, but the one thing that is on their side, I think, is that their fixtures are slightly better. I mean, I said that Troyes were good, and that was completely wrong. I'm getting that totally confused. Troyes are awful, but so are Amiens. Amiens' fixtures are dreadful on the run-in. So it's much of a muchness, and I think dropping points like that against Saint-Etienne could prove costly come the end of the season. But next up is Lille, which is a huge game. And Lille look like they're slowly finding something. I think, obviously, the first half against Lyon, they were poor, but they do have that star quality. I mean, the investment that they made in that squad, there is talent there. Thiago Maia, Araujo was superb. Even Nicolas Pepe's chipping in goals, which will really get under their skin a little bit. So, big game at the weekend, certainly.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned them there, Lille, are the team just, a couple of places above them, and they seem like they're starting to get a grip on things. But another team that's sliding, and I want to chat about them a little bit, is Amiens, who played Toulouse and were a little bit plucky, really, to get that draw in the end, because they were a man down, but they had a really good spell sort of November time. It reminds me again a little bit of Gazlek Ajaccio a couple of seasons ago, that they had that really decent spell where they looked like they might even flatter to deceive and end up staying up. But since then, I mean, December in Ligue 1 was full of defeats. They had one win in January, but around that, one draw and then, four defeats at least anyway. And in those sort of games against teams around them as well, which is an issue because you look at some of their running. I mean, Nantes, Rennes, they've still got those two to play. They've still got Lyon to play away. They've still got Monaco to play away. They've got Marseille to play away. They've got to play Paris Saint-Germain. They have an atrocious sort of running, really. They've got all the big teams left to play. That should put the fear of God in them, shouldn't it? It feels like Amiens will be there or thereabouts in terms of being in those, at least in the bottom three now, given that they have such a mountain to climb in the second half, this last third of the season.
I'm really concerned for Amiens. I think they, with of the sides in those in the fight there, for me, the most at risk, just because of what they've got coming up. And I think, we were right to praise them. I think they've played some good football. I think Gal Kakuta has settled back nicely into Ligue 1. Harrison Manzara wide has looked good too, and it's just they haven't been able to pick up the results and get games over the line. Traore hasn't done as well as I think they'd hoped. He's not chipping in with the goals that they needed. I felt like that when they signed him, they were getting an experienced forward, but hasn't really worked out like that at all. I think their squad's good enough. It's just they haven't picked up the points, and they need to start getting results, and they need to get them soon because, as we were saying, their running is absolutely appalling. And for me, they're the favourites of the non-Mets sides to go down, just because of what they've got coming up.
Absolutely, and then you start to one more side really that are in that mire really is Toulouse, who have picked up really since Pascal Duprat was removed as manager. They beat Troyes, they beat Nice. Obviously, a loss against Paris Saint-Germain is nothing to scratch about really, but 1-0 was really positive. They'll be a little bit annoyed that they've drawn this one, especially with Monaco coming up this week. But you look at a couple of games in the future. They've got Metz in the near future, Strasbourg, Dijon, Angers as well still to come. Lille still to play as well. They've only got they have got the Monaco game, but they've got them at home. They've got Marseille, but they've got them at home. That Lyon game can maybe be really a dead rubber from their point of view, at least for playing away. But it just feels like they're starting to maybe get things together. They're not conceding as many. They've only conceded one since Dupras has gone. Obviously, they've only scored 2 at the same time, but they are getting maybe back to where they were best, and that is in that young defence. And it feels like that they have enough, doesn't it, Peter?
Yeah, you touched on it with the defence. I think it's not really a surprise that they have shut the door a little bit more. And Lafond's been superb, and I think they've picked up the points when they've needed to, and that managerial bounce has really helped them. And I think they'll be okay. I think they'll be okay. I think Lille will be okay as well. I think it's Troyes and Amiens and Angers for me who will drop into that. And I think with the games that Toulouse have got coming up, they can certainly pick up points, and I expect them to.
Yeah, and it feels like looking at the rest of that table. I mean, Strasbourg are probably just about done enough. They'll pick up enough results, I think. And then you're looking at Dijon and Caen, and they've definitely done enough to stay up this season. Let's finish off on a nice high note and very quickly our Ligue 1 snapshots. I mentioned Richards earlier. Unfortunately, he couldn't join us. And I'll start this week because there's one that I really enjoyed in a way. And I shouldn't really, but Layvin Kurzawa, unfortunately, he started for Paris Saint-Germain and played reasonably well, but didn't really do too well with this Chinese New Year, really. All the players for Paris Saint-Germain and Marseille at least had Chinese writing of their surnames on the back of their shirts. So Layvin Kurzawa posted on Snapchat his wonderful shirt with his name in Mandarin and with a Japanese flag next to it. I don't think he quite understood what they were celebrating. It wasn't the cleverest move from a player that's maybe not had bright moves in the past. I'm thinking maybe the salute to the Sweden players and bits like that in the past when he was in the under-21s. That maybe wasn't the cleverest one. He's not the sharpest tool in the shed, but he certainly won't make that mistake again if he gets the chance to do that again, at least anyway, when the new Chinese New Year comes around next year, possibly. But Peter, what's your Ligue 1 snapshot?
I've got 2. One is Ernest Saka, the Strasbourg defender against PSG, asking Cavani for a shirt, which he got. But then Cavani's response when Saka offered him his was just like, no, it's good. I don't need your shirt. There's a video going around of Saka trying to explain to a PSG official saying, he's just ignored my shirt. And the other snapshot is that 15 years on from Didier at Guingamp, his son Isaac has signed for the club. So there's another Drogba at Guingamp.
Yeah, and put the fear of God in every single one. If he's anything like his father, wow, he could be a really good player. I mean, that's probably why Guingamp have tried to get in it as soon as possible. And could you imagine? I don't think they would have imagined it a while ago, but could you have imagined a front 2 of Guingamp that has Lilian Thuram's son and Didier Drogba's son? You could have never made that. I don't think you could have made that up, really.
The gambling on the gene pool.
Yeah, exactly. All they need to do now is sign Tyler Walker from Forest, and then they've got Des Walker's son as well. It'd be an extra little bit of a mix. But that maybe for another time. And that's all that we have time for this week. My thanks to Peter and all of you listening at home. Join us for the preview show on Thursday, and the main show will be back at the same time, same place next week. A bientôt, and goodbye.